Thank you. Welcome. Before we start, I would love you to just all introduce yourself.
Oh, my name's Josh Krachewski.
It's how I'd have said it.
Oh, sorry, I'm from PMG. And I'm also a proud Wackle male ally.
Hi, I'm Claire Sadler. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at the British Heart Foundation, but also WACL President for 2025-2026.
And I'm Tom Guyden. I'm the Managing Director of Adam and Eve TBWA.
And I will be chairing the panel, and I am Katie, CEO of Starcom and incoming WACL President for the year.
Woo!
Woo! So that's exciting, isn't it? So we are talking about promoting for potential here. And I think before we start, one of the things whenever I talk to senior leaders, I always ask them about what got them to where they got to. And almost every time there is someone who saw something in that person and promoted them, probably ahead of them even knowing that they were ready to be promoted. That certainly happened to me. And I think that is where we want to really talk about and dig into today on this panel. So before I start, I'd love each of you just to talk about someone that saw that potential in you, what that meant, what that looked like, how that meant that you felt like you were promoted almost ahead of being where you thought you were ready, and what that has meant for your leadership as well. I'll start with Tom.
Oh, thank you.
That surprised you, didn't
I know.
it?
It's like, I thought I was going to go last. No, I've been very lucky. I have had many instances of people sort of standing up for me and believing I could do it even before I did. Oddly, most of them have been women. So I've been very lucky in that there's been numerous women in my life who have sort of really stood up. And I think the biggest indication of that was I started my career in New York, and there was a woman in New York who was the CEO of the agency I was at who said, you know, I think you can go to London and like lead this project. And at the time I was like, are you nuts? Like, I'm not ready for that. And she sort of believed in me and helped me sort it all out. And then I moved to the UK about 11 years ago and have just never looked back. And it was one of those instances, again, where it seemed so over the top and larger than life sort of as an opportunity that I didn't think I was qualified, appropriate. And she truly believed in me and sort of made it happen, and it changed my life entirely. And I think I was very lucky to be in that circumstance and situation.
And was it one moment where she said that, or was it a kind of coach? Like, how did she demonstrate that as
I think it was the fact that I kept putting up barriers and she kept poking through them. So I kept saying, well, it's going to be really expensive to get a visa for an American to the UK. And she was like, well, we can afford it. And I was like, well, you need to send someone more senior. And she was like, you're senior enough. And so I think it was every instance of me trying to come up with an out for her. And she always had a solution, an answer, a response. And so she truly believed in me before I believed in myself that I was appropriate and qualified for this role. And I think that ability to sort of really push against it, and her push as equally back, was something that helped me to feel qualified and appropriate and all of those things.
Claire?
I've definitely also been a beneficiary of someone believing me. I suppose the one standout example, which I think changed the trajectory of my career and certainly the experience that I gained, was at that sort of middle management level, head of level. And it was a pair actually who sponsored me. It was my marketing director at the time and our HR business partner. And I was working at BT at the time. We had a business problem in terms of needing to retain more of our broadband customers. So a big business problem, and it was a big business problem because it, I suppose, catapulted me in front of the exec on a far more regular basis than I'd ever had before. So in terms of board level exposure, that was really great in terms of just getting that. But also in terms of the role that it was much broader than what I'd been doing. So it gave me experience much wider across the business in terms of commercial, in terms of pricing, in terms of customer experience, customer service. Much more than I would have got had I stayed doing what I was doing. And it was that role probably that I credit with giving me the exposure and the experience to then go on and do other things, bigger roles and broader roles.
And the fact it was the two of them, was that because it was a formal program, or was it just that they had a pincer movement?
It wasn't a formal program at all. It was, as I said, a business problem, and they wanted to put some dedicated focus around it. So, they looked around the team and went, "You'd be good at that.
You do that.
You'd
you
be
do
good.
that.
You
hard
like
thing.
You like problems. You like solving problems. Go and and gave me a shove to go and do it. And I'd just come back from maternity leave, so that was like, how do you balance that?
So you did it in a haze of sleeplessness as well.
Yes.
Josh,
I've got, well, I mean, like Tom says, I feel like every job that I've been given, I feel like I've been promoted above my station. And I still feel like a complete imposter in every job that I've done. But I'd say two. First of all, the first one was Nick Lawson, who was the CEO of Mediacom in EMEA. This was, and I got asked to come and have a conversation with him, and I was really excited because it was Mediacom, and I thought, wow, can't believe I could work at Mediacom. And then he gave me the job of like COO across EMEA, and that was like a massive step up from what I was doing where I was before. So that felt like a big. It wasn't like I felt like I still wanted to do it, but that was a big thing. And then I was there for a year. And Karen Blackett, who was the CEO of Mediacom UK at the time, sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, I'd like you to come and work with me in the UK and be my successor as CEO. And that for me was a real moment because I never sort of thought I ever wanted to be a CEO. That wasn't something that had ever occurred to me in my career. And when she said that, that was definitely a kind of a moment of like an inflection point, I think. And it was, again, like couldn't quite believe she was saying it. And by the way, it took about 3 years before I actually got the job, but that was definitely a moment for me.
Mediacom was brilliant at that. Really, really, in those days, the succession planning and the way they spotted talent. So, Karen, having done that for you, how did you then use that in your approach with your talent, your team, and your leadership style?
I mean, I feel like it's my favorite thing in the world is identifying talented people and then trying to help them forge their careers. Like I'd say in my job, that's the thing that gives me, in any job that I've ever done, gives me the most pleasure because, you can see it's often the people who don't believe in themselves or who don't kind of necessarily come across as really confident, who you can just identify something special about them. And I've done it a lot in my career, and yeah. Does that answer the question?
And do you think, have there ever been ones where you've been like, oh, is this risks pay off?
Sometimes when I've made hires, it's felt like a risk. But generally, if it's someone who I've worked with and I've gone, yeah, that person could go way up from where they are, like 2 roles up from where they are right now, easily. It never feels like a risk. Like, like I would back them. They often don't back themselves, but I always back them and work hard with them to get them there.
Tom, you're nodding. Has it similar for you? Have you used that banking on the fact someone believed in you? How have you identified people, given them the confidence, but also given your senior management the confidence in people you're backing?
Yeah, I agree with Josh. I think more often than not, when I promote someone who's possibly not there, but I have the experience, I never feel worried about that. But when I bring new people in, that's worrisome to me unless I have the backing of someone that I trust equally. So some of the greatest hires I've made are people that I've never met, but someone I know has said, oh, this lady's great, or this man's awesome, you have to get him in. And I feel like this is a culture and an environment and a place where you can trust people, and I know who I work well with, and I know if they believe in someone, then I can believe in them as well. And so it has given me the confidence to make some of the best hires I've ever made. But I never feel worried about those in the way that I do if it's just blindly hiring someone.
Claire, from that experience for you, what are the what are the actions that you have developed in how you then support people through your leadership to promote?
I've always been very structured about it with my teams in terms of thinking about succession planning, but succession planning at all levels. So from the most junior to your direct reports, in terms of having a structured way of thinking about it. I have used and quite frequently use with my leadership team the classic 9-box grid in terms of performance and potential, just because it's a helpful framework to plot where people lie and identify those people that, I think we'll talk about this later, are not quite ready yet, but you absolutely know they could be. And it helps you put, if you like, structured actions or activities around them to help them develop, achieve things quicker or faster. So definitely a structured approach. And in doing that, it also helps you look across the team more broadly, or across the organisation and the team more broadly, and go, where have we got gaps, and how might we fill those with people internally before you look external. Sometimes you absolutely have to go externally, but it just helps that sort of, I suppose, flow and development of people in and around the organisation.
And purposeful succession planning feels like a really important part of this, like expanding the access to opportunity. Thinking about visibility, thinking about people's self-belief, thinking about how you can open up access to a group of people who often don't feel visible or don't feel that they can put themselves up there. What have you been doing that allows, apart from that succession planning, and Claire, I know how rigid, how structured you are, so that does not come as a surprise to me at all. For those looser agency people, what do you do to make sure there is that visibility, that access, that opportunity?
Yeah, I think for me, when we get to promotions and talking about promotions, the thing I always think about is like, who are we not thinking about? Who are we not seeing? Because I think Josh said this really well. The people who typically have the highest potential are often the people who are not self-promoting as much. The amount of people who come into my office and like, I'm ready for a promotion, who I'm like, I'm not 100% sure you are ready. But it's the people who are just silently doing the work and getting things done, who are not necessarily raising their hand, who I often think are the ones who are like, you are the future. You are the next best people. But it's just making sure that we have that visibility. So I think it's about taking a moment to sort of, and Claire, to your point, the 9-box grid's an amazing tool for this. Really look at the department, really look at the people in it, and think about who are the people who are not raising their hand and how are they looking, because I think typically they're the ones who are going to have the most potential.
I think as well, back to the point about visibility and I suppose surfacing the people who are less visible. If you think about the things that have been delivered really well within the team, within the agency, within the organisation, campaigns that have delivered, the results that have been delivered, and scratch the surface and go, who worked on that? And who worked on it in the background as well? So not just the person who might be the face of it, but the periphery of people as well. And surface it. One of the things that we do a lot of is show and tells, because it's great in terms of shared learning across the team, but it also gives those less visible people a chance to talk about their work.
So I feel like this is a bit of a long answer, but I've been thinking about the question. So you said that MediaCom was very good at this sort of thing.
I always thought that maybe they weren't.
So,
I always thought they were.
I think we were.
Yeah.
But we were sometimes a little bit guilty of promoting people like us, right? So if we looked at like the comms dynamics, you'd have like driver, expressive, analytical, amiable, right? All the leaders, not all the leaders, but a lot of the leaders were drivers, right? And some of them were expressives. And then we would have a sprinkling of analyticals and then some amiables. But the first two would definitely be the most. Now, in those days, the world was slightly different in the way that agencies were successful. If you won business and you didn't lose business, you were successful. And it's as simple as that.
That's still the same.
That is still the same. But the way to win business now is a little bit different.
That is true.
And it's much more around, the capabilities are much more around all four of those blocks. And I think we were quite good at going, let's make, like, a good leadership team has a good mixture of different comms dynamics. But I think where I work now at PMG, this sounds like I'm really plugging PMG, but genuinely, this is something that I found quite surprising, that I've never seen before. In some ways a bit terrifying, but quite good, is that it's a genuine meritocracy. And what I mean by that is when we do promotion cycles, at every level in the business, they do this, I can't remember what it's called, but they do this thing where they discuss every single person who's being put forward for a promotion. And it's never the actual individual who's putting themselves for it's always someone else who's put them forward for promotion. And like literally 30 people will discuss that individual and discuss how they find that person, how they work, what they do, what their attitude is, how curious they are, how good they, like, what are they a good human being, you know, how much they care about their clients. And I did the first call I did when I was watching this. I was like, bloody hell! Like everyone, I'm like, this is. But actually, and it's something like you have some quite big debates, like sometimes quite heated debates about individuals. But it creates a genuine meritocracy where when people are promoted, it's a no-brainer. No one's arguing against it. Those people genuinely deserve to be promoted, and they get promoted. There's something quite cool about that, I think.
It also gives actionable feedback for people that don't get promoted in terms of where. Because you're getting literally 360 feedback. So those blind spots that, as an individual, sometimes we don't see, that's helpful in itself in terms of future potential.
As long as there are enough people in that room who can spot people who aren't the loudest. So as long as there are enough people there who can go,
but that's the point.
I know the word.
That is the point of it.
That they are close
it's specifically
enough to it.
That is for that reason, because it's to avoid that sort of thing happening.
Yeah. It's great. Right, we are now going to talk about sponsorship and the importance of sponsorship. So for anyone, I'm sure all of you know this, but I'm just going to clarify to begin with. Mentorship, we all do loads of mentoring. We all have mentors. We probably all mentor people as well. And mentorship is brilliant, but it's quite passive. So mentorship allows people to solve problems, allows people to feel heard, allows people to just have senior people to role model and discuss. But what mentorship doesn't really do is actively drive career progression. And sponsorship is something where you are really, as a sponsor, you are responsible for advocating for your sponsee when they're not in the room. So it drives real change, it drives promotions, it drives options, it drives visibility, it drives access. And I think lots of organizations are getting really, really good sponsorship programs. Firstly, are you doing sponsorship versus mentorship in your organizations? Are you doing it formally? Are you doing it because that's just what happened? I love your active listening, so I'm going straight back to you, Tom, because you nodded at me.
Thank you. We do sponsorship. We do mentoring in our agency. I'm at Admin Eve, but I struggle with formal sponsorship, and I'll tell you why. Because I think, again, all the examples I have of being the results of my sponsorship from other people have made me feel really impactful because I knew they did it off their own backs. It wasn't that they were being forced to or being judged on the fact that they were. They believed in me, and so they put my name forward. I sometimes find when it's formalized in that way, then people often put people's names forward, not necessarily because they think this is the best person for this job, but because they believe that they're being judged on that sponsorship. And so that's my only catch. But I do feel that sponsorship is important. I just think we have to be mindful and careful about the way that we sort of judge and formalize that process, if that makes sense.
I think that's a really good point. I've sponsored a couple of people, and I think all of them were under-visible for their ability and their potential. So I think it was almost an equitable, like rebalancing the equity and therefore work. But I agree. I mean, I did therefore speak about them in a room more than and advocate for them more than I would someone else. In fact, it worked against me because they got another job somewhere else, which was entirely my fault. Yeah. But good for them. Sponsorship.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever been involved in a formal sponsorship. I didn't even know they existed, if I'm honest with you. But I sponsor people all the time. I've sponsored you.
You have. Very successfully.
Yes, you've been very successful. You're about to be a WACL president. I'm very proud of that. I've sponsored.
Did he? I
No,
don't
I
think
didn't
he
do
did
that.
that.
I did that bit, George.
Everyone on this stage has sponsored you.
Yeah, I know. There's a theme.
No, I guess what I do. Yeah, I mean, I'll do what you've described, which is I'll talk someone up if I think they deserve to be talked up. I do it a lot for people who I used to work with, who were in the company that I used to work for. That I have nothing to do with that company anymore. I do it in competitors. Like if I meet someone and I think that person's really great, I'll call their boss and say, "I met that person. Just wanted you to know I think they're amazing." And and they might be like, "Yeah, I know. I don't need you to tell me that, but I will do that just because it gives me pleasure to do that." I don't know if it ever necessarily helps their careers or anything, but I've never really, had a thought. I guess what I'm trying to say is authenticity is what it's all about, right? When you start pairing up people with other people and going, right, you're going to do reverse mentoring, or I always find those things a bit weird because there's nothing kind of organic about it. And like sometimes it can work, like certainly reverse mentoring can work, but when you're then expected to be the sponsor of that person, it just feels a bit fake. So I think sponsorship's really important, but it should be done authentically and organically.
Claire, what's your view on that?
I've never been involved in a formal, so the opposite to my structured progression, talent progression planning. I've not been involved in a formal sponsorship program, either in terms of me sponsoring someone or being formally sponsored. But I've been both the beneficiary and the advocate of that. And I would agree, actually. I think because sponsorship, you're putting your own reputation on the line, usually, in terms of advocating for someone when they are not in the room. And you want to wholeheartedly, you want to be fully in terms of knowing them, understanding their ability, and going, I'm absolutely recommending this person. You should see them, you should speak to them. And I think that's why it feels better, it feels easier, to Josh's point, where it is authentic and it's grown organically because you have worked with the person or you've known the person, or I think it just has, and I think perhaps it has more impact as well. Because those conversations happen when the person is not in the room.
Yeah. I agree. I also don't agree. So I've done 2 formal sponsorship programs, and it gave me access to meeting people in the organisation I would never, ever have met before. They would never have come across my path. They taught me a lot. I got one of them a new job. The other one wanted to write some thought leadership and had never been brave enough to do it. And I coached her through that and then helped to get it published. So it wasn't new jobs, but it was something quite tangible, which I guess you could get out of mentoring as well. I just think sponsorship holds you to account more. It makes you follow up.
But you would have done that because you believe in that person.
Yes, but I would never have met them if I hadn't been teamed up with them on sponsorship.
Yeah, and that's where it has value in terms of having a formal program. Is the matchmaking of
in a big organisation.
In a big organisation, absolutely, yeah.
And I think I definitely hear what you're saying, Katie, and I think that's important, the sort of matching. But to me, that also can be a mentorship program because you have to get to know that person, and then to Claire's point, you're sort of putting your own, credit to the line. So I do believe that that's really important. But my fear is when you make it into a sponsorship program, if you don't truly believe and understand that person can deliver the things they say they can, then your name's on the line, and it sort of puts you in a difficult position.
Well, then this brings us all back to promoting for potential, doesn't it? And so next question, thinking about defining ready. So if we are, don't worry, I won't go to you first with that face. I'll give you a moment to think. How do we define ready? So I think often people will say, I really want, I want to be promoted. Often you'll say to people, what about this job? I remember when I was asked to do a head of new business job, I was like, I can't do that. I literally have no idea about how I've run one pitch. What are you talking about? I can't do that. I think it's very easy to go, I'm not ready. I can only do 50% of this job description. I shouldn't be doing this. How do you define ready? How does ready also look at the moment while we're all rebuilding teams? We're all reskilling into a hybrid, agentic workforce. What does ready look like? Is this a moment of opportunity? Is this a moment of threat? Claire, I'm starting with you because Tom's still nodding at me. But I'm not going there again.
How do you define ready? I don't think in any role you want somebody who is absolutely ready now, because then they can do the job immediately and they're going to be bored within 6 months. You want to be able to, you want people to be able to grow into their job. And if you had to put a percentage on it in terms of how much of that job can they do versus can't do, then 50-60% is good, because there's room for growth. And then you're looking at, okay, back to the point about potential. How quickly do they learn? How hungry are they to learn? Because sometimes it's about going above and beyond to learn quicker. I think so that point about potential, what am I trying to say here? Hunger to learn and speed at which somebody can learn is really important in terms of stepping into a new role. We touched on this a little bit when we were talking about this panel in terms of AI, and we can't ignore that AI is having an impact on everybody's business, everybody's role, and it often gets it has got quite a bad rap in terms of it's coming to take your job. But I actually think there's quite a positive element to that in terms of AI can be a coach, it can be a mentor, it can be a trainer, it can help upskill your team quicker, individuals quicker, yourself quicker than perhaps you could have ever done before. And it's almost, you have that one-to-one trainer alongside you stepping into a role. I think there's something that's really quite powerful about that and positive about it as well in terms of helping people develop their potential.
And do you think it also means that when we're promoting for potential, the skills that you're looking for that promotion are quite different now? Because you don't have to be an expert in all of the craft skills you might have had to be before.
I think I love what Claire just said there. Actually, that the idea of you never really want someone to be ready. I've never really thought about it like that, but I think that's quite true. I think what you want is particularly with agentic and AI now. If you are a curious person who wants to learn and broaden their horizons, you'll do well. I think. I believe that. I believe if you lean into agentic and you lean into AI and you want to learn the AI is not going to take your job. You're going to be using AI, right? And I think there's loads of opportunity, particularly in our industry, for people right now. But you've got to be curious. You've also got to be bloody hardworking. I think it's really important, and I think it's really important to get the. Obviously, I'm not saying people should be working all night, all weekends, anything like that. It's not about how many hours you work, but I think if you want to get ahead in work, you do have to be willing to put the hard work in, as well as and not just expect it to happen for you. And I think it's important to recognise that. And if people want to be promoted, they need to be willing to work hard. So I think it's that curiosity and the willingness to put the hard work in.
Okay. And
No. Okay.
you can add.
I was just going to say, I think, to Claire's point, I do think it's hunger is massive, but I also think it's thinking about the skills that someone in that role would have that they already possess. Similarly to you, I was made head of new business when I had only worked on one pitch, and I was like, why are you idiots? What are you thinking? And I remember the CEO at the time said, you have all those skills, you just haven't yet nurtured them into the way that a head of new business needs to. And I think of that, it's a hunger, but it's also it's understanding this is what the top of that level looks like. These are the skills that they have, and you have bits and pieces of those. And so we can just harness those into that role. And it's so being mindful of all of those things as well.
Right, and we're about to, last question, we're going to wrap up. So thinking about the WACL Change the Stats playbook, so one of those levers of change is all around promoting for potential. If there was one thing leaders did to really think about promoting for potential, what would that one thing be? Who wants to start? You've all stopped nodding now because none of you wanted that question. Go on, Josh.
I'm not sure I completely understood the question.
What one thing would you do now if you were just looking to promote for potential?
Okay. Well, I mean, it would be. I think the difference. I think now it's about trying to look at someone's whole self and whole like kind of reality in life and who they are as a human being. And then I think it is about do I believe in that person more than often is the case more than that person believes in themselves, and do I believe that person will be willing to, something. One other thing I suppose we didn't talk about was taking yourself out of your comfort zone. I think that is another thing I would say. Is that person going to be willing to take themselves out of their comfort zone to push themselves? I guess I'm trying to find something that I haven't already said.
Yeah, that's very
That'd
good.
be it.
I like that.
I would say structure. I would go back to structure because I think it helps you identify talent.
And objectivity.
Objectively, it helps you identify it, and it helps you look at the diversity of it as well, because it just makes you more purposeful in how you look at it, so you avoid that recruiting or promoting in your own likeness. And usually that use of a grid is a discussion amongst a team who will all have different viewpoints. So purpose and structure drives diversity.
And I actually want to go the complete opposite, Claire. I think we need a little less structure. We need to really believe a little bit, go with our hearts, because I think to the whole point, I think you have to sort of be visible. You have to be mindful of the people who are not always visible. And I think sometimes that means sort of working outside of structure and just sort of saying, this person doesn't have all the skills yet, but I think they have elements of them to be spectacular, and believing in that. But I think you have to sort of step outside the sort of day-to-day structure to sort of find those people.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If anyone has any questions, we can take one or two. I know.
There's got to be some questions.
I've got a question for you, Katie. What's your answer to that last question?
So we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment in completely rebuilding and re-identifying team shapes. And I think in doing that and shaking up what we've done 4 years in the same way, in the same job roles, it just allows us to think completely differently. And in doing that, I think we will end up finding people whose skills are the skills you need, which is dealing with difficult situations, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with ambiguity, judgment, human EQ. But I think job descriptions are going to look very, very different in the next 5 years from how they've looked in the last 30. So I think using that to promote and find people that you wouldn't have thought of will be really useful.
My question is, what about women? Because when you identify a potential leader, do you act differently or do you think differently, whether it's a man or a woman?
Excellent question. Do you want to start that, Prez?
I can start with that. Do I act or think differently? I suppose I draw upon my own lived experience and my own imposter syndrome and loud self-critic. And I probably overcompensate in terms of confidence building. What can I do, or what can I put around that person to make them feel more confident and more able to do the role that they've been put forward for? And that's not to say that there are men who also suffer from imposter syndrome, but I suppose I'm just more mindful of that. So, what can you do? What are the things that you put around that person to help them feel confident going forward in that role, whether that be coaching, mentoring, skip one-to-ones, formal training, whatever that might be in terms of a development plan. But yeah, just I suppose wrapping them, having a wraparound in terms of the things that are going to help them succeed.
Is that for everyone?
Well, anyone who wants to.
I mean, I think something we haven't really talked about today is empathy, and I think empathy is like such an important leadership quality. You know, definitely one of the most important qualities, I think. And I do think, and I want to be careful not to say something that's a soundbite that gets me in trouble. But I do think women generally, not generally, but you see the women that I've worked with, I've definitely experienced more empathy from women in the main than men. And I think that they are often very, very successful as a result of it. And our businesses are very successful as a result of it. So that's definitely a key consideration when hiring, when promoting, when trying to foster a good a good leadership culture in a business. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that was definitely a consideration.
And I think one of our other 5 levers of change is the language of leadership and the words and adjectives that describe leadership. And I genuinely believe they're changing. So I also wonder if we didn't talk about it because that change is happening, and a lot of that emotional intelligence or confidence, like the words that describe leadership, I think in the world of fusion skills in hybrid AI organizations are already the words that we usually associate with female leadership more than male leadership. So I think there is also a bit of that in play. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to thank all my panelists, Josh Krzyzewski, Claire Sadler, Tom Guyden. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.